Welcome to the Dynasty Series. Here we will take a look at some of the greatest dynasties in sports history, looking at the teams, the players, and overall accomplishments. Today, I want to take a look at the Dallas Cowboys from the early 1990s. For a 5-year stretch, the Cowboys dominated their division and appeared in 3 Super Bowls, winning all 3 of them. This team actually started in 1989 with the infamous Herschel Walker trade. With Michael Irvin on the team already, having been drafted in 1988, they used their first overall pick in 1989 to draft Troy Aikman. The team then used their 1990 first-round draft pick to add Emmitt Smith, making them a lethal offensive trio known as the Triplets. This group would pay immediate dividends as the team improved from a 1-15 record the year before to 7-9. They would miss the playoffs, but Smith would win Offensive Rookie of the Year and a trip to the Pro Bowl, along with Coach Jimmy Johnson winning Coach of the Year. 1991 brought another season of great improvement, with the team finishing 11-5, second in the NFC East division behind the eventual Super Bowl champion Washington Redskins, whom they beat during the season. The win gave the team great momentum, despite that during the Washington matchup in Week 12, Troy Aikman would be injured and miss the rest of the season. Recently signed backup Steve Berline would lead the team to 4 straight victories, mostly fueled by Emmitt Smith and strong defensive games, landing them a spot in the playoffs. The wildcard matchup against the Chicago Bears was an away game at Soldier Field, but this didn't stop them as they won the game 17-13 for their first playoff game win in 9 years and signs of things to come. In his first playoff game, Smith would rush for 105 yards and score a touchdown. This year, Aikman, Irvin, Smith, and tight end Jay Novacek were all selected to the Pro Bowl. 1992 was the breakout year with the addition of Charles Haley and drafting Charles Woodson. The underrated defense, which would have 0 players make the Pro Bowl this year, finished as the #1 defense in the league. So good were they that the Seahawks were held to just 62 total yards in a 27-0 blowout and finished the season against Chicago holding them under 100 total yards as well. Aikman, Smith, Irvin, Novacek, Nate Newton, and Mark Stepnoski all made the Pro Bowl. This defense, in addition to their already potent offense, led the team to a 13-3 record. This was good enough for first place in the division, leading them to the playoffs once again. This time would be different, however. With home field advantage, they cruised past the Eagles 34-10 in the divisional round, heading to San Francisco for the NFC Championship game to face the 49ers. The game was tied going into halftime, but the second half belonged to the Cowboys, outscoring San Francisco 20-10, going on to win the game 30-20. Aikman would throw for 322 yards with 2 touchdowns, and Smith would have 114 yards rushing as well as 59 yards receiving, scoring a touchdown each way. The defense would collect 2 interceptions, spoiling a 313-yard performance by Steve Young. Super Bowl XXVII would feel anticlimactic by comparison, with a 52-17 blowout win over the Buffalo Bills. The Triplets took the biggest stage and shined brighter than before. Aikman would have 273 yards passing with 4 touchdowns. Smith rushed for 108 yards and scored a touchdown, while Irvin pulled in 114 yards, scoring 2 touchdowns. As a side note, this Super Bowl was the first time the ratings increased during the halftime, with the introduction of the halftime musical act. 133.4 million people tuning in to see Michael Jackson perform. 1993 was the final year for head coach Jimmy Johnson and would not go as smoothly, with Smith holding out for the first 2 weeks over a contract dispute in which the team would lose both games. This would mark the first time a team would start a season 0-2 and go on to not only play in the Super Bowl but win it. The season would end with a 12-4 record, a first-place finish, and once again home field advantage in the playoffs, this time all the way through. Smith would finish the regular season as the leading rusher, regular season MVP, and eventual Super Bowl MVP, the only player to do all 3 in a single season. This year, the team would send 11 players to the Pro Bowl. The first-round matchup against the Brett Favre-led Packers would see the Cowboys down by 3 early, but scored 10 points in just 23 seconds to end the first half. This was accomplished with a fumble recovery from a kickoff after Dallas had just scored. The defense was able to pick off Favre twice as well as losing a fumble. The NFC Championship game would be a rematch of the previous year's game against the 49ers and resulting in another Dallas win. Dallas jumped out to a 28-7 first-half lead and never looked back, going on to win the game 38-21. Smith would shine with 173 total yards and 2 touchdowns. Speaking of rematches, the Super Bowl would also see one against the Buffalo Bills. This was the Bills' fourth consecutive appearance in the Super Bowl, but had yet to win one. On this day, that would not change, with the Cowboys winning back-to-back championships with a score of 30-13. As I said earlier, Emmitt Smith would win the MVP and did so with 132 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. The game would also tie a record with 0 passing touchdowns from either team. 1994 saw a 12-4 record, but was not considered a success as they lost the NFC Championship game to the 49ers in their third straight year playing them. The team once again sent 11 players to the Pro Bowl and drafted future Hall of Famer Larry Allen in the second round. The first round of the playoffs was an easy 35-9 victory over the Packers. The offense shined here, with Aikman racking up 337 yards to go with 2 touchdowns. Irvin had 111 yards, Novacek 104, and Alvin Harper 108. This was the first time since 1982 that 3 players on the same team had over 100 receiving yards in the same playoff game. Smith would leave the game in the first quarter with a hamstring injury, but he would return for the championship game against the 49ers. San Francisco jumped out to a first-half lead of 31-14 and won 38-28, snapping Aikman's 7-0 record as a playoff starter. Despite having a significant advantage in total yardage, the Cowboys committed 5 turnovers, including 3 interceptions by Aikman. A disappointing end of the season for sure, but not the end of the story. 1995 would be the last of their Super Bowl wins, so far at least, and begin with another first-place finish in a 12-4 record. They lost a number of players in free agency, with the salary cap coming into play, and drafted no one of note, which would prove to be an issue in years to come. They lost a starting cornerback, Kevin Smith, in the first week after an injury, and replaced him with All-Pro Deion Sanders. Once again, having home field advantage in the playoffs, they cruised through the first game, beating the Eagles 30-11. The defense racking up 5 sacks and Sanders notching an interception. Kevin Williams stepped up with 124 yards receiving, and Irvin scored on his solo reception. Facing the Packers once again, this time in the NFC Championship game, Favre would find himself on the losing end, having thrown 2 interceptions and being sacked 4 times despite his 307 yards and 3 touchdowns. The triplets took this game as an opportunity to shine again, seeing Smith have 150 rushing yards with 2 touchdowns, Aikman 255 yards with 2 touchdowns, and Irvin 100 yards receiving, catching both of the touchdown passes. Once again, the Cowboys won their way into the Super Bowl and this year faced the Pittsburgh Steelers. Dallas jumped out to a 10-point lead in the first quarter and went into the half up 13-7. Smith scored the only touchdown of the third quarter for either team, and that gave the Cowboys the lead for good, resulting in a 27-17 win for their third Super Bowl in 4 years. Defensive back Larry Brown would win the MVP for his 2 interceptions and total 77 yards on both. This would end the Cowboys' run in the NFC as the dominant team, and would be followed by years of mediocrity and frustration for fans. As of late, the team has been consistently better and the fan base is as strong as ever. The near future looking bright for the team once again. Thank you for joining me. Please hit that like button if you did indeed like the video, and subscribe so you don't miss future videos where we explore more sports dynasties throughout the years.